Welcome everyone to AIMA's Cause Marketing 101 webinar presented by MediaCause. For those of you who are new to AIMA, we are a nonprofit organization that creates opportunities for marketers to network, learn, and share their time and talents within the community. We are a 100% volunteer-run organization, and our board is made up of brands, agencies, vendors, and other community marketers who are most dedicated and friendly people. Also, with the support of our sponsors, we bring Atlanta's brightest digital marketing and advertising minds together through social networking and educational events. Some of AIMA's upcoming events to have on your radar include Wednesday, November 13th is our members only Cocktail Connections event. Those are always so much fun and something that are exclusive to AIMA members. This week or next week, we're going to be doing an Atlanta marketing trivia session at that event. So please join us. Then on Tuesday, November 19th is our Digital Divas Level Up Forum event. This is open to all AIMA members for free, and then there's open tickets available for non-members as well. That is going to be an event where you'll hear from an esteemed group of leaders covering topics such as building your personal brand in the workplace, to knowing your worth and asking for it, and so much more. Those are going to be a short series of TED-style talks followed by 3 interactive workshop sessions to help you level up your personal career trajectories and implement change within our own organizations. So don't miss that Digital Divas event, November 19th. And then finally, rounding out the year, we're going to have our annual holiday industry party with the AMA, and that is going to be on Thursday, December 5th, and tickets are available for that as well. So if you enjoy educational content like this webinar and other networking events, you should look into becoming an AIMA member. Members receive free admission to all of our monthly educational events, annual social events, and have access to our exclusive member-only events. So be sure to visit atlantaima.org/membership and learn all about our individual, group, and corporate member packages, which just pay for themselves after you attend just a few AIMA events. Now let's get started with what's going to be a phenomenal webinar, no matter where you are in your cause marketing knowledge. Be sure to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions throughout the webinar for Amy, Emily, and Amarena to answer at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, please welcome Amy Small, Vice President of Creative at MediaCause.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So, hey guys, I'm not sure how many of you were part of the first cause marketing webinar that with AIMA a couple months ago. That one was sort of a big overview, Cause Marketing 101, what it is, what it's not, how many brands are getting it wrong, and some great examples of brands that are getting it right. Today, we are going to build on that a little bit. If you weren't here for the first one, totally okay. This is all wonderful, and you're jumping in just at the right point. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about things like finding your social issue and how to create cause marketing partnerships and activations that not only work for you as the brand, but also work for the nonprofit organization or beneficiary that you're working with and hoping to help create change in the world around us. So we all know cause marketing, right? It's big, it's buzzy, it's sexy, it's trendy. It is great for business when it works, and it's great for our society. Except, of course, for those cases when it's not. And when it goes wrong, it goes very wrong. So quick refresher, something I shared in the last webinar, what cause marketing is and what it's not, and just kind of breaking down the key pieces of this. So what it is values driven, but it should not be trend driven. It should engage consumers, not be designed to appease consumers. It's built on a basis of ongoing social responsibility, which means long-term commitment to the effort, versus a short-term social responsibility, kind of that chasing that shiny object syndrome of something that a brand feels like it has to get on the bandwagon with. Cause marketing, yes, increases profitability, but is not just about changing perception. That's kind of where we fall into the lip service category of talking a big talk, but not walking the walk. And cause marketing should be designed to better society. Again, not just talk about bettering society. So the calls to action and the impact really have to be there as well. So there's a lot to consider when you're starting to build your cause marketing activations. How do you know where to start to make sure you're getting it right? So this is me, Amy Small, VP of Creative and Brand Strategy at MediaCause. We are a digital agency that only works with nonprofits and cause-driven organizations. But I come from a long background working in the consumer goods world. And so with me today, I've got two other amazing women who are going to bring some insight and knowledge and share their experience and expertise in how to get cause marketing right and how to form the building blocks to make that happen.
Hi, everyone, and thank you. Sorry. 1 second.
Okay, we're gonna do this differently. Here we go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amy. My name is Amarna Diaz. I'm the Director of Digital Marketing and E-Commerce at Mizuno USA. We're a Japanese company, so I work with our teams in Japan and EMEA, but I'm responsible primarily for all the products activated here in the US. I'm mainly going to talk to you about programs that we have activated with NPOs such as the Breast Cancer Research Foundation and Soccer in the Streets, which we've been running over the past 3.5 years.
All right, thank you. And Emily.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Kane Miller. I am a regulatory lawyer by training and have spent the last decade and a half of my career at the intersection of public policy and philanthropy, where we've really focused on making actual change in community that's measurable and meaningful. And 6 months ago, I left my role at the wonderful company to launch my own firm to help businesses and brands actually do community engagement work and social impact with heart and with results.
Amazing. So you see we've got a great collection of experience that's going to be able to share all of that wonderful knowledge with you guys at the webinar today. So what are we going to go through? Quick kind of synopsis. We're going to start with talking about how to think about your social purpose and translate that into figuring out what social issue you should champion as a brand or even as an agency working with a brand in that space. We'll talk about the building blocks for creating your cause marketing partnership, a few tips for selling it in internally, because you could have the best ideas and the best plans and the best intentions, and sometimes the biggest hurdle is actually getting leadership to give you the okay to do it. We'll go through some case studies, like Amarna mentioned, Cause Marketing in Action from 2 of the programs that she has worked on at Mizuno. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to measure impact, both on your side as the business and for the nonprofit organization as well. And then just bringing it all together in a last little closing bit. We'll have some time for questions and answers, and I'll share a sneak preview of what will be coming up in the 3rd Cause Marketing webinar scheduled for sometime in January. So starting off with from social purpose to social issue. Brand purpose is kind of the big term that you hear bounced around a lot. It is buzzy. You will come up with some 3 or 4 million different hits if you Google what is brand purpose, and probably each and every one of those is going to have some slightly different definition of brand purpose. I started going down this route and wanted to talk to you guys all about brand purpose and realized that that would be an entire other webinar in itself. So I'm going to shift the conversation just a little bit from talking about brand purpose, which if you go back to a capitalistic model of the world, the purpose of any brand is to sell a product and to make money. But that's not what we're here to talk about. So let's talk about social purpose instead. And this definition is purely something that I put together. So it is brought with opinion and with perspective that I bring to the table. But the way I like to define social purpose is by way of all of those revenue generating business functions. So the things that are meant to bring you and your shareholders money, your people, your process, your product, and your promise. Your social purpose is how your company strives to impact the world for the better. And I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Simon Sinek or his book, Start With Why or The Golden Circle, but this is a construct and a concept that I have come back to and come across so many times throughout my career working with both brands and nonprofits. And it's really a great exercise for going back and thinking about the why you do what you do. All businesses, all brands are really good most of the time at talking about the what. the product that you do, that you offer, the service that you provide, sometimes even the how it's made, how we think about putting it together, how we approach our customers. But to really get to your social purpose, you need to come back and think about that why. Why do you do what you do? Besides the almighty dollar and besides making stakeholders profit on their side, what's sort of that truth or that belief that everybody in your company holds to be true? And when you can define that, that's really where you start to figure out what your social purpose is, because it becomes bigger than the product and the brand and the service, and it becomes about your place in society. So a few examples that I pulled to share how these bigger brands have been able to form their social purpose. So we all know Crayola, we all grew up with crayons. Their product purpose is to create great crayons and art instruments for kids and adults too, because we all like to color from time to time. But their social purpose is to help parents and educators raise creatively alive kids. If you think about Patagonia, they were actually founded with the mission and the purpose to create a business that was able to give back and protect the planet that the people who founded the business loved. And so their social purpose is to use that business to defend the place they call home. And then Purina, what is their product purpose? Their purpose as a brand is to make really high quality pet food. But their social purpose goes beyond just the product and is to help people and pets live better together.
So for Mizuno, and something that Amy was alluding to before, finding your why is going to be a key part of this process. So if you don't understand what you're selling or what you're bringing to a consumer, that should be something that you should go to the drawing table and figure out. For us, beyond our products and beyond the technology, it's truly bringing the power of sports to consumers everywhere and truly making our consumers reach beyond that. And that really parlays and works nicely with our work for our nonprofits. Specific to all of these different examples that Amy has touched on, so when you're looking at Crayola, when you're looking at Purina, when you're looking at Patagonia, all of these and one purpose can champion a variety of different issues. And as you're defining what the purpose of your overall brand, again, whether you're an agency or whether you're a company, truly defining your why can help you align as to what your further efforts are going to be. For Purina, for example, their purpose to help people and pets live better together. Some of their issues that they might have identified could be pet adoption, animal health, nutrition, domestic violence support, and so forth.
And all of those still ladder back up to helping people and pets live better together, but would probably have completely different organizational partners that they're working with.
For us at Mizuno, obviously bringing happiness and joy to all through the power of sports, and this ladders to a variety of different initiatives that we have, whether it's with the Braves here in Atlanta, Georgia, whether it's with different youth organizations across the United States, making sure that different team sports are working collaboratively together, or with a variety of different nonprofit organizations. As we've mentioned through a variety of these different slides, if you're just starting out with a variety of your nonprofit efforts, picking just one actual initiative might be a little bit difficult. So as we go into some of these other slides, having a good brief is going to help you kind of cut down and isolate where your focus might be.
All right, thanks so much, Alma and Amy. So here at Ethos Giving, we created something called the Good Brief, which is really meant to be the brief before the brief. Oftentimes, creative folks sit in a room, come up with a great marketing campaign, identify a social issue, and then sort of back into how they're going to help the world. We are here to both argue and make it easy to say, you know what, let's change that order. Let's think about the kind of good that we want to create in the world, and then build the campaign and the activations around it. So what does that actually look like? It starts with engaging the key stakeholders in your organization and asking some really important questions. The first thing to think about is your brand or your company. What's going on for you all that has a connection to the world? We talked about Crayola and Purina and Patagonia. All of those things, when you heard those examples, you sat in your chair and you said, that makes sense. Purina wasn't going out there and saying, you know, we're going to go work on putting solar panels up, because it's not logical for the brand. The next question is to engage in a social need. Your brand could be working on something that really makes sense for the brand, but doesn't make sense for the world. And it's important to be answering a question that needs to be answered. It, number one, drives value for the community, and number two, really makes it feel real. The next is thinking about your key audience. As we mentioned, we're here to talk about how brands engage in social change. The brand knows their audience best and who their customers are, who the folks are who are listening to them. Finding a cause that aligns with the folks who are in your universe who are going to help you amplify this effort does matter. And then the last thing is timing. If you're working on something that's related to food security for Thanksgiving, launching it in July doesn't make sense. And so really putting your ear down to the grindstone for whatever the social issues are that are important to you and engaging in them in a manner that's logical is so important. So this is a really, really key one. Don't get distracted by a shiny object. And this is true for life and very, very true for social impact work. Part of this effort is really defining your mission, sticking with it. And when something happens that's really, trending or exciting on a day-to-day basis, it's important that you don't pivot away from the work that you've already committed to. And all the more reason that identifying that work and really doing your diligence to make sure that it's a smart option for your brand is so critical. And it's also important to remember that just because you start with one issue doesn't mean that you can't take up others later. This is a long game. It's important to really engage with work that you're excited about, but like everything, it's an evolution, and we can all think about issues for everything from homelessness to food access to environmental causes. Those causes and the work related to them changes over time. So of course, your engagement with it will as well. And building in that flexibility is important too. So digging in, how to build the cause marketing partnership that we would all identify as an A+ option. So the first thing that you need to do is really dig into your brand goals. And we mentioned the Good Brief earlier. You saw a preview of it. There's a link for it at the end of this webinar. And it's a resource tool that helps you engage and walk through all of these questions. But in brief, just to go through it together today, the first thing to do is to identify what your brand is hoping to achieve through this cause marketing effort. Get really, really specific. Also, get really specific about which products or services related to the business are you activating around. It can get very, very squishy very fast to put up an idea that is fairly loose that all of a sudden you have multiple brands in your platform engaging with and it doesn't make sense. Be very, very clear at the outset. And then finally, trying to define from the beginning what you want the activation to look like. Are you trying to create an event? Would you like to have an e-commerce partnership? Being very clear about what the campaign looks like and what the deliverables are going to be from the beginning will help you be successful throughout the whole process. Now, this is equally important. Nobody can make great decisions by themselves. The first thing that you need to do is identify who within your company has experience in this area. To use the Crayola example, engaging creativity for youth. Is there somebody in the company who is a mom? Is there somebody who is a former teacher? Someone who can really help you, whether this is part of their job responsibility or not, brainstorm while you're getting your ideas together. The next question to really think about in your community, and community can be very tight, it can be your neighborhood, or community can be the issue area more broadly in a national spectrum. Who are the people who are really making waves in this space, who you're impressed by, not just in the nonprofit side, but maybe elected officials. Maybe there's an outspoken, to go back to our example with Crayola, an outspoken teacher advocate who you know. Really go and start thinking about who's smart in this space, who you can borrow from and think this through together with. And then finally, will you work collaboratively with your partner, trying to figure out who it is that you can engage, but also how you want to engage them. So when you do reach out to them, it's very clear what your hopes are, what your expectations are, and getting them to come on board with an understanding of what the work is going to look like, as opposed to getting them very excited and then, things fizzle. So you've got your plan in place, you know what you're looking to do, you know who you're looking to talk to. The next thing is to set up these conversations and identify who you're talking with and ask them what their needs are. The most important thing to come to a conversation for cause marketing is question. Social issues are complicated, and the more people who you can trust to have initial briefings with before you make decisions and really concretize the plan, the better.
And don't be tempted to blindly bring your partners or your potential partners an idea. This is something that I've seen a lot of agencies and a lot of brands fall into the trap of coming up with this really great thing and getting super excited about it and building this entire universe and ecosystem in their minds, putting a presentation together and taking it to a nonprofit and saying, here, what do you think? Do you want to buy it? And it's like, it's great and exciting and it's fun to work on, but the problem with that is that it usually doesn't really answer a need for that organization. And the organization's going to have a really hard time saying yes to something that doesn't benefit them. So once you've kind of got this idea of who you want to partner with in your mind, there are some questions that you can bring to your organization to really understand what their needs are and how you can build an activation together that is going to benefit both of you. So start by asking about their goals. What are their goals for growth and impact? They may have a 5-year strategic plan. Talk about that with them. See what they're trying to accomplish in the next 12 months, in the next 18 months, and how you can play a role in that. Also ask them what internal resources they have available, because you may end up coming up with this incredible idea for a campaign or an event that they just don't have the manpower to support on their end, and that doesn't really work for anyone. Ask them where they need the most support. We oftentimes think that it's dollars, and in a lot of cases, nonprofits really do need the donations. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are other assets that are more valuable to them as an organization to fulfill their mission. Is it just driving awareness of the cause or of their organization as a whole? Do they really need more volunteer hours versus more donations? And even when you are talking about donations, is it monetary or is it in kind? So really get to the heart of what is going to make the difference for them so you can work to build your activation around getting those things that they need. Ask them who else they're working with. Especially if you're talking to a larger nonprofit that might have a national footprint, there's a good chance you are not going to be the only brand that is working with them. So think about who are those other players in their partnership ecosystem, what are they working on, and how can you be additive to it? So it's not a competitive thing at that point. You want to make sure that all of the partners that this nonprofit is working with are supporting them in working towards their greater goal. Also ask them who are their decision makers. Nonprofits have a very interesting way of getting very siloed. There will be development, which is the fundraising teams. There will be marketing. There will be a separate communications team if they're lucky enough to have a separate PR team, sometimes separate social, oftentimes not. But find out who your decision makers are so you know who you need to tailor your content to, but also more importantly, what you can actually impact. If you are only working with the director of communications, and that person has no influence whatsoever over what happens on social media, which seems crazy because it's communications, but that's sometimes how nonprofits work, that's going to make a difference in how you structure your activation or whatever you might want to create. And then how will the nonprofit themselves support your efforts? What resources do they have available to be able to amplify what you're doing on the brand side? Can they be sending things to their email list? Are they willing to put content onto their social media channels? Again, just how are you going to make sure that this is a true partnership? And how will they measure success? What does a successful campaign activation event look like for them in numbers, in impact, or whatever those metrics might be? So when both sides are aligned on the roles and the goals, and you've kind of got all of this worked out, it's time to get to work, almost, because you still likely have to sell this into your leadership. I think it's very rare that you see a cause marketing effort come down from the executive team. I think most often you'll see people on the team who are really passionate about something and have to sell it into your leadership to get the green light. So Emily, do you want to take us through these steps?
Absolutely. So tip 1, rely on resources. So obviously the Good Brief is here for you, but there are other references that you can create. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Watch Shark Tank, get prepared, and know how to go into those meetings with confidence. Tip number 2, Know your audience. As Amy jokes, does your CEO like puppet shows? Well, puppet shows they shall have. In all seriousness, though, tailor your approach and your content to understand the needs and the priorities of the leadership. Is it really important that they understand eyeballs and how that drives on social media? Make sure that your pitch isn't entirely about the social impact, but also about how that social impact can drive engagement online. Tip number 3, speak from the heart. At the end of the day, this is passion work. And if it finishes and nobody has a feeling of why this is important and why this would be special and why this would be good for the community, it's a problem. Of course, there should be metrics. Of course, there should be research, but definitely feel ready and prepared to explain why this is important for the brand, why this is potentially important for you or for members of the team, and why this would be good for the world. One of the ways to think about that is to bring colleagues who are connected to the work, if that's relevant. Additionally, if you feel like it's appropriate and you've already engaged with a nonprofit leader in the community who you're really excited to align with, it may be helpful to bring them to the meeting. After all, they're the ones who are engaging this effort on a day-to-day basis, and that can make a huge difference.
Okay, so we've seen all of these tips for getting to be able to create your cause marketing activation. How does it actually come together?
Sure. So a lot of these tips, which I think are fantastic, are a great way to get buy-in. You have all of the plans in place, and that gets you about 60% there. And once you have all of those, the different budgets, the different plans in place, you still have to do a lot of the work. So first thing is you're going to need a lot of energy. You're going to need a lot of enthusiasm and passion to get all of the work done and in place. So I'm going to share with you 2 different examples that are varying in scale. One that took about 2 months to get in place from the time we identified the budget and the inventories. Obviously, I'm coming from a retail perspective. As from my perspective, I own the budget within our team, so I was able to identify and actually move a lot of the plans in order to implement this. The other example is a lot larger in scale, and we've had it in action for 3.5 years. Both of these examples have a lot of different people that are working across the content, working across the planning, we're working across multi-teams. So I think one of the biggest takeaways to keep in mind is that this is not just one person. This is not just one brief. You're working with a lot of different people. You need to make sure that you have the passion in order to implement it. So specific to Soccer in the Streets, this is an organization that we leveraged and worked with in 2018 in collaboration for Cyber Week. And this was a great example because Cyber Week happens every year. For us, we activate on the e-commerce side, different promotions, and we saw it as a great opportunity to find a local organization that we would partner with in order to activate a 1-for-1 model. So we basically had a promotion running through the entire week of the holiday, so that when you purchased a soccer cleat, we would give back a soccer cleat to the organization to support their kids on the teams. And we also gave 20% of all the profits sold from those specific soccer products back to the organization. So specific to the why, again, and as we mentioned, this is 100% in alignment with our organization and how we want to give back to our mission. So we're giving back to kids. We're fostering a love of sport and a passion for sport. This organization fosters just collaboration with different teams, and it ultimately helps for these kids to enrich their lives through the ability to play sport. None of our key ambassadors were utilized for this activation. So again, this was more of a smaller campaign in comparison to some of the other NPO work that we do, but it still utilized a variety of key team members across our soccer division in collaboration with the Soccer in the Streets team, as well as in partnership with the Atlanta Braves. And these are just some different shots from some of the on-campus activations that we did close to our store at SunTrust Park here in Atlanta. So we actually set up an event for the kids where we gave a percentage of the different team members their cleats, and we invited their families. We gave them all tickets to games with a Braves game for an upcoming event. And then we actually set up pickup soccer matches around SunTrust Park. Our next example that I'm going to share is actually a program that has been running for, pun intended, for the last 3 years. This is much larger in scale, and again, in comparison to the previous example, we actually, in collaboration with our product designers, we do a limited edition shoe. We also do designed apparel specific to BCRF, and a portion of the proceeds of the entire collection, $5 of every apparel item, $10 of every shoe, actually go back to BCRF every October when we're activating the campaign. So we actually just ended the campaign this year just a few days ago. So to give you an overview of this specific campaign, obviously for BCRF, this is a global organization. So there are multiple different for-profit companies that are working with them. So you have to be understanding of the fact that if you are going to work with a larger group, that you're going to be one of thousands. And that is just part of something that you need to understand in terms of how you need to activate and work in collaboration with them. For us, this was actually seen as a way to leverage current relationships that some of our ambassadors already had. And this is really important if you are on the agency side and you work with a retail group and you're trying to find an opportunity to work with an MPO, research your influencers, research your ambassadors. What are they interested in? So we had 3 professional athletes that were really invested and involved, whether it was through their families or just work that they were doing on the side with BCRF, and we already had partnerships in place with Fleet Feet Sports in order to activate this. So the BCRF campaign was activated nationwide with our limited edition shoe. The apparel, we do pink runs every October, and all of our athletes that are involved with the campaign do different films, and we have a variety of different survivors that also activate the content. The next slide is just an overview of some of the content. Again, this is the smaller campaign for Soccer in the Streets, but you can see that even though it's a smaller campaign, it only lived for a month during Cyber Week. We still treat it, you have your email components, you have your social components, you have a landing page, you have your homepage content driving to all of this, and we're pulling metrics all specific to this. So there's truly no small effort just because you're working with a nonprofit organization. So now we're going to get into some of the just how you're going to measure impact. It's not just about what's in it for me. You also want to be able to show that for the nonprofit organization, you're able to bring them value. And again, this is important if you're the for-profit or the nonprofit, agency side or corporation. So going into some of the results from Soccer in the Streets, by doing the 1-for-1 model and also the percentage revenue from Cyber Week, just within that short amount of time, we were able to deliver 70 pairs of cleats, which all of those cleats are over $80. These are the junior cleats. So all of those kids for that year were provided with cleats for all of their upcoming matches. So they will have new cleats for the next 2 years. And that way that enables the Soccer in the Streets team to not have to receive, whether it's through grants or through additional donations, those items. So that was a great win for us. And again, within our company, we're extremely passionate about sports. So that's beneficial for us. Within 1 week, we were able to provide them with those $20,000 as well. So that's beneficial for them. For BCRF, again, this is a partnership that we have in collaboration with Fleet Feet and BCRF. So just specific to this past year and just over the course of the month activation, we've already driven over 125,000 from just digital activations. And again, what's key in comparison to this activation versus the activation for Soccer in the Streets, this is a nationwide, You go to Fleet Feet Sports in Austin, you go to Fleet Feet Sports in San Francisco, and you'll see the limited edition shoes there during the month of October, as well as some of the apparel. Across both of the different activations and partnerships, we're continuing the relationships with both of the different NPOs, and that is key to building both of these different types of programs. You don't just want to create a 30-second film, throw that on your homepage, and that's it. These are truly partnerships and relationships, and you really want to have the passion for these organizations in order to continue and build and show that your organization is truly passionate about what they're doing internally.
So, Amma, those are amazing examples. And it's so important. I think folks on the line would be shocked to know how many people put a lot of time and intention into launching something and then never measure it and never share the results. And that really misses, so much of what the point of this is, which is making sure that there's social good and that people are inspired by it. So just quickly, and this is one of the reasons it's so important to brief this in well at the beginning. You can't know where you're going unless you're clear on what the goals are. Making sure that you're targeting the numbers, whether that's funds raised, tickets sold, hours volunteered, PR mentions received, et cetera, that it's really, really clear what the numbers show in terms of impact. But then there's also some of these things that are intangible, that, people's perceptions were changed, legislation was impacted, there were thought leadership conversations that happened because you stirred the pot. And those are things that are maybe more anecdotal, but really, really important to capture and to continue to share in the story, because it's not only important for the work, but it's inspiring for others to see what can come of these activations when they're done well. And, the biggest thing that I think people miss is looping back with your folks, whether those are your customers, the leadership who you sold this product to in the first place, this idea to in the first place, and your internal team, and making sure that these wins are communicated is really, really critical. And often that can be done through stories that are captured in video content or other ways. So making sure that whatever your plan is for these activations, you have this memorialization and impact measuring as part of your plan.
So quick recap, it's a lot, right? You have to think about who you are, what your purpose is, what kind of organization you want to partner with, create that partnership, sell it in, build the activations, measure it. It sounds like this really daunting task, and it is big. It's a big undertaking, but there is such an upside to doing something like this. And if you think about it, it is, it's not a sprint. I think Emily and Amarena have both said there's a ton of work and a lot of people that it takes to pull these kinds of efforts off. It's a marathon. It takes time. It's something that hopefully once it's done successfully, you're able to scale and continue to build out the program and build out your impact with that organization and bring in other organizations. Like we mentioned, your social purpose doesn't just have to live with one issue. As you grow and as the cause marketing and even the CSR parts of your brand grow, you're able to take on more and make more impact. So just thinking through the investments and making sure you know what's in it before you jump in. It's an investment in your social purpose. Again, long-term is the key. Investing in the issues that you've decided to tackle. Investing in the partnerships that you're going to make with your nonprofits. In the activation ideas itself, coming up with things that are intriguing, engaging, and going to move the needle, get you excited, get your internal teams excited at the brand, and also really have an impact for the organization. That is an investment in time and money. It will take some effort and man hours and probably some budget from your brand or your client if you're at an agency to pull this off. But it's worth it. An investment in the outcome. And when it's all done well, that return on impact is 100% worth everything that you've put into it. So we've shared a lot today. I want to open the floor to any questions that we've been getting throughout the session in the panel. So we are going to swap over to the panel. Let's see, Q&A. Okay, so we've got one question. For soccer in the streets, what was the biggest barrier or setback you had to overcome?
So I would say that I'll start with a positive first, because I always like to be positive. So one thing is that being able to provide for every child on the team was something that I wish we could have done. And although I don't consider that a setback, that is definitely that for me personally, I just wish we could have done that, but I also have to balance the numbers. So I couldn't provide a cleat for every single person. When you are actually going through the logistics in terms of planning out everything, so whether you're working, again, I don't know what the balance of everyone, whether you're from an agency or if you're from a company, but from the retail side, I had to work with the soccer division, then determine how much inventory we had, and then actually go through the logistics in terms of the event planning. Because our store is at SunTrust Park, there's a lot of logistics that go into that. So it goes beyond just the logistics specific to setting up the actual promotion. Because we're setting up promos on a daily basis, that part was honestly the easier part. And working with Soccer in the Streets was fantastic. It's more so balancing and making sure that my CMO and my boss was okay with the percentage of giving that we were willing to balance and make sure that everyone was happy. I hope that answered your question. Feel free if you have any other questions to look back.
All right, we've got another question. How do you measure a tangible benefit for the brand? When selling the idea to the brand, they often want more measurables for their benefit. Just brand impression from the campaign. That's a tricky one. I feel like we could all probably jump in on this one. Sure. So the tangible benefit for the brand. I mean, yeah, you can think about things in terms of engagement. And I think that's because that's where so much of the conversation is about in the brand world. It's a really good place to start. If you're able to say, if you're able to use social listening, for example, and see what your consumers are talking about and what consumers in the general space are talking about and what they care about, you can kind of give some rough ballpark idea of how amplified your messaging will be if you are to engage in that conversation with something meaningful and an activation. So there is that. There's social mentions, and if we do this kind of thing, we're going to get into this conversation and we're going to get more visibility and we're going to be able to attract blah, 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 blah. So there's that kind of thing. I think from Amma, you can probably speak from the retail or the product perspective on how partnering with an organization brings this, obviously great tangible benefits to the organization, but it's also a revenue driver.
Right. I think depending on the content that you're building in support of the campaign, that's going to be key in determining what your KPIs are, right? So if you have let's say a 30-second spot, and I come from a creative background, Amy and I used to work together, so that's where kind of my focus always is. So if you do have a 30-second spot or a 15-second spot and you're running that on social, yes, impressions, engagement are going to be key, but if you're truly trying to drive revenue, think of a more engaging way that those impressions and shares are going to provide true value to the company. So if in your social, say whether it's social copy, and you have, for all of the amount of shares, we'll be providing a certain percentage or a dollar for dollar back to the company, make it more tangible. And those are things that all should be discussed in the planning phase, versus when if it's the person that's handling social or your brand manager, etc. Don't just determine those things at copy on Facebook. You need to do social strategy specific to the entire campaign before any of that is actually posted. Because those are truly key drivers that are going to be beneficial for you when you're actually providing feedback to the company.
Emily, I think you can probably speak to some of that too, even in thinking what Amarena just said about knowing what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve as a brand or as a company in that brief when you're first setting up this activation.
Absolutely. So hopefully you're working with leadership that when they see something that really makes sense and is logical and has a great benefit for the world, they'll get it and they'll be excited about it. The one thing that I did want to dig into that I think is a sort of the flip side to the question that was asked. Yes, I think it's important for people to understand the brand value when you choose to do this, but more than that, when it's not done well, or when it's skin deep, or when it's something that ultimately doesn't make sense for the brand or for the business, it can actually potentially hurt the brand. So I think when it's well briefed and when people come in and really do their diligence, have smart partners, it not only can protect the the excellence of the impact, but it also protects the company. And, ultimately, I think probably some of you are in roles where somebody says, hey, slap a good sticker on this and it'll be great. I think it's important to communicate to leadership that today's customers, talent within organizations really are demanding things to be real. And, Ama's examples are perfect. There were real kids who got real cleats, who really got to play a game that they loved because of this activation. It wasn't kind of a general thing that some kids somewhere will benefit from this ... and we never follow up with you. And so that's really what I hope everyone takes away from this conversation.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Any other questions? If anybody does have any other questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A. I did have a question for Amarena. Having worked on something smaller scale and local like Soccer in the Streets and something big like the BCRF, are there pros and cons, or there's pros and cons in everything, I guess. What are the different lessons that you've learned from each of them? Things you would do again, things you might do differently next time?
So I would say specific to Soccer in the Streets, I think something that I would recommend anyone that's trying to activate if you are in the retail environment, Giving Tuesday is a great avenue and channel in order to sell into leadership an idea. So if you are agency side and you have this good idea, Giving Tuesday is one of the biggest days. So it's coming up. And you can leverage that to say, every consumer during this time period is going to be expecting a brand to share what they're doing. And it doesn't have to be what we did in the past. It can be what we're doing in the future, or what we're going to be doing on this day, or what we're doing on this week. So I think that's something that I think was a win for us with Soccer in the Streets, because we saw that as an opportunity to not just talk about, because we could have just put highlights from the BCRF campaign,
right?
But we saw it as an opportunity to do something a little bit differently and engage the community and leverage a partner and do something additional beyond what we were already doing. For BCRF, it's been growing every year. So determining and understanding your metrics is something that I think as you're building on a campaign, if you have a campaign that you have, the first year, always analyze what performed, what didn't work, especially if your video for any brand is going to be key. So video right now, whether it's on your site, whether it's on social, it's just for the most part going to perform better. So if you have the dollars to invest in that for a nonprofit campaign, leverage it. But always review your metrics. And that's been something that's been beneficial for us, is determining, is a 30-second spot actually performing better than a 15? We have this amount of dollars. Let's actually do more 15s and then make sure that we have a stronger CTA. So those are things that we are optimizing all the time as we're building on these different programs. And again, in comparison, when you're looking at those two different programs, Soccer in the Streets doesn't have any film content. Soccer in the Streets, we leverage content that they already had from a photography standpoint, and we built out their email campaign, their social content, landing page, et cetera, to support.
I think from a creative standpoint, that's also a really good thing to keep in mind. As creatives, we always want to create, but you don't always have the budget, and it's not always necessary.
Right. And I think too, I know you alluded to this a little bit earlier, you have to understand what are the capabilities of the teams that you're working with. So you never want to create a grandiose idea without getting too much. You need to understand, is the nonprofit group that I'm working on, do they have the capability to further this campaign beyond the span of time that I'm presenting it? Or, does their support, if they have a support agency that would be supporting this, say, a year from now, can they actually keep this running? So those are things to always keep in mind when you're trying to build a long-term campaign and partnership, and kind of determining what the scale of a campaign is going to be and what the budget that you need in order to activate it is.
And I've actually fallen into that trap myself, working with few years back, working with a local nonprofit here in Atlanta. My team, we created an incredible campaign for them that lasted a year and did so well. But when we were not involved in that anymore. And this was, it was a learning for me and it was a learning for our team. They didn't have the internal resources to be able to continue it. And so something that was actually really successful for them, despite their best intentions, ended up just getting left on the floor because they weren't able to continue it. So it's something really important to think about from the beginning.
And I think to add on to that point, that's why being able to show whether it's whether you're just showing how much volunteer work is being driven back to that MPO, being able to show how it's actually measurable is key for the nonprofit to know, for the for-profit group to understand, in order for them to have the passion and energy to continue those efforts. Because even across both of the examples that I shared, a lot of the people internally that are continuing the efforts in order to keep these moving, we have a lot of passion for it. And if we didn't have the passion for it, it wouldn't get done. So that's definitely key.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. What qualities should you look for in a nonprofit when considering a potential partnership? I mean, I think, Anna, you just mentioned one, which is the ability to be able to sustain and support and contribute to the effort.
Yeah, I would say that if, depending on the type of organization that you are, if you know that you want to leverage digital channels, again, I come from a digital tech world, so whenever we are trying to activate a campaign, I want to ensure that the group that we are working with is capable of supporting and activating those other channels as well, in collaboration with us. But again, it doesn't matter whether you take BCRF and you compare it to Soccer in the Streets, completely different sizes of NPOs. So I think ultimately you first need to determine, does it align to my mission? Does it align to what I'm doing? Is a consumer, the filter on, whether something is real or not is very, very high right now. And with social media, if something is not, actually doing what is being told, people are going to see through that. So you need to make sure that it truly aligns with your cause. And then beyond that, just try to determine how much it's going to parallel with how you're activating the campaign, and how you truly see all of the different components being brought to life.
I think relationships are also really important. If thinking about, if you're hiring someone for your team, if you are pitching a new client, think about the working relationship between you and the folks at the organization. You may have identified an organization that does align with your mission and it's got all the right resources, but if you and the point person, the leadership of that organization, if there's not a really good working relationship, because you have to work really closely together to bring these things to life, it's probably not going to have the outcome that you've intended. So there's a little bit of an intangible, I think, there just on the human fit also between the two different groups.
I think adding on to that, because I know we spoke about this earlier, something that's important too when you're researching nonprofits is to understand what other groups are they working with. So if you are researching a potential nonprofit that, if you're from the for-profit side, and they are working with a competitor of yours, or they have an ambassador that they are championing across all of their content that maybe isn't aligned to your mission, then understand, do that work before you pitch the idea to them. Because ultimately, some of the partnerships that an influencer, that ambassador has, or that other group that might be affiliated to them, that might impact the work that you're trying to do with them. And that's really important. Do that work before you pitch.
And just to add one thing, I think a lot of folks navigate toward big national organizations that have a large brand presence, which is understandable for all the reasons that it makes sense. Some of the things that Am and Amy talked about are going to, come up again and again with these big national groups. Don't be afraid to look at regional players, especially if you really get along with the executive director or really get along with the programmatic people. They can oftentimes have a really, really value add for the partnership, because you are going to be, frankly, a bigger fish in a smaller pond of partners for them. And, often those kinds of opportunities can go overlooked in campaigns like this, and it can be a real treasure.
All right. We have time for one last quick question, and then we will wrap up. So this last one, can you elaborate on how to navigate the legal areas of cause marketing with NPOs, particularly around any legal documents or CTA wording? From my perspective, I've actually never encountered any challenges with this. I feel like if you've got a good working relationship with the NPO, it's a very forthcoming and sort of transparent thing that you as a brand are partnering with an NPO. And so there's nothing kind of underhanded or shady to get around.
I will just say that in terms of making sure that your relationships with those teams, so whoever your partners are, especially if you have multi-tiers and components to a campaign, that you know who your point person within the organization for approvals are, whether it's specific to content, whether it's specific to documentation, so that there aren't multiple tiers of people that are reviewing different documentation, because there are, on the content side, you're gonna have language specific to affiliations. So on the BCRF side, there's a lot of multi-lockups that we have with BCRF, with Fleet Feet, with Mizuno, and how those are in order is approved. Those are definitely details that you need to make sure that there is just make sure that it is aligned as to who is actually approving that, from the nonprofit side, from any other third-party collaborators, in order to make sure you have all of that aligned.
Have you ever run into anything, Emily?
Absolutely. So I navigated this for the last decade and a half. And the things that I would say are really important, number one, is being super clear. Oftentimes people want to do contracts quickly and do one-pagers. It's better to hammer these things out on the front end and to, be very, very specific about the kinds of goals and communications, and as Alma said, who has the control over what posts when, and all of that. The other thing that I would say, if it's something that your team has never navigated before, it's very possible that the nonprofit has, and you can ask them for their forms that can be updated, and that way you're not starting from scratch. The more you approach this as a collaborative opportunity and not something that's very legalistic and adversarial, the better it is for everybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I want to do a quick preview of what is coming up in the next session in January. Date is to be announced, but our next one will kind of do a flip on what we did today, sharing with the brand side today, right, with Amarena and Emily. Next time, we're going to share about cause marketing from the nonprofit POV with 3 nonprofit leaders here in Atlanta. Andy Goldsmith, who was the VP of brand for the American Cancer Society and also at Pursuant. Tiffany Rivers, the social media manager at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and Jeffrey Brown, the VP of Development and Marketing at PADV, the Partnership Against Domestic Violence. So I'm sure that actually a lot of the questions that you guys were asking today and the conversations will come up with them too, because they're navigating these same challenges, but from a different perspective from the nonprofit side. So before we end, a few resources and follow-ups. AMA will be posting this recording of this webinar to their YouTube channel, date to be determined, but we will let you guys know, and please feel free to reach out and email AMA to get more details on when that link will be posted. Their handle on YouTube is @AMA, and you can download the Good Brief at ethos-giving.com. That's that awesome worksheet that Emily and her team have created to be able to get these cause marketing campaigns off the ground. And then MediaCause, my agency, if you're curious about learning more about us, you can visit us at mediacause.org. So thank you to everybody who joined. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Amarena. Thank you, Lisa. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day and a great rest of the week.